Which of the following is the closest implication of the statement to break new ground or perhaps to deepen a freshly turned furrow? Now, we see this statement here in the third paragraph. To break new ground or perhaps to deepen a freshly turned furrow in the field of Indian history. This is talking about the changing attitude of the historians. We see this from the first and second statements. Along with types of historians with their varying bias, the attitude to the content of Indian history has undergone changes. Here, Indian historians have been influenced both by their local situation and by the changes of thought elsewhere. It is in this field that this work can claim some attention since it seeks to break new ground or perhaps to deepen. Then we have the reference. So what we're looking for is basically a change in the thought process, change in the outlook of the historians. Option A says, dig afresh or dig deeper. Now, this is first off a distortion because it talks about digging. So we are not essentially talking about digging here. This is an analogy. So we cannot say that this is actually about digging. So this doesn't work. Second, dig afresh or dig deeper. So either go deeper, find more detail, or dig afresh. Find a new field, find a new place to study, find new information. None of that is relevant. We've seen what we are looking for is a change of thought process, a change in the attitude of historians. So dig afresh also doesn't work. That's close, but it's a bit of a distortion. So A is incorrect. Option B says, start a new stream of thought or help establish a recently emerged perspective. This is perfect because it says, start a new stream of thought or help establish a recently emerged perspective. A change in perspective is exactly what we are talking about. So this generally connects. And then we have start a new stream of thought, which is local situation, establish a recently emerged perspective, is changes of thought elsewhere. So we have the attitude of the content, attitude to the content of history. Indian history has undergone changes. We are talking about Indian historians here, have been influenced. So that is where we talk about starting a new stream of thought or in being influenced by their situation or local or by changes of thought elsewhere. We're talking about establishing a recently emerged perspective. So overall, this also connects directly. So generally and directly, this is a very good fit. We can qualify B as a valid answer. Option C tells us, begin or conduct further work on existing archaeological sites to unearth new evidence. Yet again, this takes the idea of digging a little too seriously and a little too literally. Begin or conduct further work may be okay, but on existing archaeological sites to unearth new evidence. New evidence as such is outside the premise. We are not talking about new evidence here. We are talking about a change in perspective. And then fresh work or further work in archaeological sites. So essentially, we are talking about literally digging into the dirt. Doesn't make sense. Too literal, we can eliminate option C. B is a much better choice. Option D says, begin writing a history free of any biases. Now we see that bias has been mentioned here. And by that, we can tell that this is a distortion. Along with types of historians, with their varying bias, the attitude to the content of Indian history has undergone changes. So yet again, it's not about bias, it is about a change in perspective. And then to say that begin writing a history free of any biases cannot be said. We see that all the examples given later on, we see Dodwell or Dame Lillian Penson, R.C. Dutt, W.H. Moreland, etc. It is not directly mentioned whether these people had biases or not. There is a negative statement mentioned about that. It has nothing to do with bias. It may be connected in a sideways manner, stating that there is a negative connotation here. We see it here. The early official historians were content with the glamour and drama of political history, from Plassey to the mutiny, must be talking about the Sepoy mutiny, from Duplex to the Sikhs. But when the Raj was settled down, glamour departed from politics and they turned to the less glorious but more solid ground of administration. So they were into political history as long as such history was glamorous. When the glamour left history, they turned towards administration or administrative history. So doesn't shine a very positive light on them. This is almost a negative aspect. So maybe there is bias. There's a possibility of bias which we cannot eliminate. Hence, D cannot definitively be said. So D is incorrect. The correct answer is option B.